So for people who don't know, Charly is 12 and she has autism. And I guess if we're going to use some sort of outdated terms, it's high functioning autism. So she's verbal. She didn't talk till she was 5 or 6. But so she's come a long way since then, but she sort of has these underlying autistic traits. And I think a lot of people think of autistic kids as sort of emotionless. Mm-hmm. And when in fact, my experience is for a lot of them, it's the opposite. They're actually like highly sensitive and highly emotional. So my reaction to watching her react to that story, the first thing is that she's also, like a lot of autistic kids, has high levels of anxiety. Mm-hmm. And to like accommodate that anxiety, she can't suppress it. It's in her education plan at school. She flaps her hands, and she has to have access to like self-stimming behaviors to calm herself down. Mm-hmm. And as I watched her, this is part of why I think your book is so special, because as I watched her react to it, that wasn't happening. Mm-hmm. So what that said to me is that she was able to like process the emotions without turning on the anxiety, which is pretty incredible.
Yep.
And then she also flees. She'll also run away. If like me and sisters are having a conversation, and mind you, I have 4 teenage and preteen daughters. There's a lot of tears in this house. Charly doesn't like tears. So she will either say, stop talking about that. Can I leave, please? Like she will not, like you saw, like mm-hmm. she won't ask. She'll flee the scene.
Right.
And that didn't happen either. So I really am struck by the way it resonated with her in a way that didn't scare her. Because we're also non-religious. We don't have any sort of those religious anchorings for her to understand. And she's 12, but she's probably a little closer to like 9 or 10, like with her understanding of the world and her like understanding of like existential aspects of our lives. And so watching her like really sit and think and like move through the emotional experience of the story without getting freaked out, and watching her like process it was pretty profound for me.
Yeah, it was certainly a profound experience for me, because I didn't realize, so I did the prototype version of the book that's been, I can see it right over there on your bookshelf.
It is.
It's been in your apartment since it was a thing.
Yep.
And it did not occur to me that she'd never picked it up. She never read it. That was her first time experiencing the story.
Yeah.
And it was also my first time, since the art has been finalized, like 100%, it's done.
Yeah.
It was my first time sitting down and reading it to a child. I've read it to my nieces and nephews a couple of times at various stages, but that was my first time with essentially, it was on my laptop. It's not in print yet, but with the final art and the text on the page and everything, sitting down and reading it to somebody.
And so watching her react, how did you feel?
Yeah, I was definitely, you could see me turning to her constantly, engaging, which is...
Is she okay?
Yeah. Which is pretty normal, I think. Parents are going to read this to their kids. They're going to be... That's part of the experience. Parents might decide... there's the joke on you ever see the episode of Friends where Phoebe talks about...
Yes, I've seen them all.
Yes. Phoebe doesn't know the end of Old Yeller because her mom would always stop the movie at that.
Yeah. Like,
parents might decide to skip certain lines or like rush past certain pages, and that's okay. It's up to every parent to know what their kids are ready for.
Well,
you tailor the experience to the audience.
What I find amazing is like she was so sort of clingy to you afterward. Like she felt safe. She felt like moved, but not in a scary way. Mm-hmm. Like, well done, Ben. I'm very impressed.
Yeah. And this is practice for me too, because I'm going to, the book is not the finish line. Publishing the book and putting it out there in the world isn't the finish line. I also want to explore from the parent's perspective, how do you approach this? How do you talk about the book with your kids afterwards? There's a lot more writing for me to do. And before I can do that, I need more experiences like reading it to Charly.
Absolutely.
Seeing how actual kids react to it. And I've tried to do that every step of the process by, using my nieces and nephews as my little test market.
Right.
Yeah, and it's a tough line, and it's something that I worked hard to calibrate as the story took shape. And I had people tell me, like, no, you can't put this in a kid's book. You can't, you're going to trauma. Like, no, you've got to dial it back. And
right.
And I did, I prefer the word calibrate to dial back.
Yeah.
Because it was definitely my goal not to pull punches, not to sugarcoat.
Yeah.
People ask, what is the age range for this book? And I don't even know what to tell them. Like, I don't know. You know your kid.
Right.
Is your kid ready for this? You tell me.
Well, and there's something to it. Like, you read books first.
Yeah.
When you're a parent, typically speaking, unless it's, Pat the Bunny or something. But,
yeah.
which is a good book too. I can tell you my perspective as a parent, which is, I don't know that there is an age that I wouldn't read that to them. It'll mean something to them when it needs to.
Yeah.
Is my opinion. And, the 10-year-old sounds right, because honestly, I know you don't have this experience, and I kind of do, because we both grew up with like religious sort of upbringings. Mm-hmm. But for those kids who don't have that, imagine like them hearing all of these other sort of religious explanations mm-hmm. and not having one of their own. Like, what a relief.
Yep.
To be like, this makes sense. Like, this is something that helps me understand this. Like, to me, it seems like an anxiety reliever versus the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, letting kids know they're not alone, because they don't have, their friends might have a church that they go to, the support structure.
Right.
And just because they don't have a church to go to, or even if they do and that's just not what speaks to them, that doesn't mean that they have to figure it all out themselves.
Right.
There are other people who have gone through what they're going through.
Right. Yeah. I'm willing to touch on something that you might mention later when I'm not there, but I'll be watching.
Okay.
It probably helps them not feel quite so powerless.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's my goal, is just to, I can't solve grief. I can't take that away. I can't fix it all for them. But if I can give them some tools that might help, and their parents some tools that might help, that's all that I'm trying to do.
You did it.
All right.
Good job.
Thanks, Amanda. Back to Future Ben.